welcome to another episode of Elevating Learning, where our goal is to bring you some of the leading global learning thought leaders to our podcast. We really have two goals. Number one, the first goal is to learn about our guests, how they grew up and their education and some influences and how they got to the role they want to, or rather, how they got to the role they have achieved. And how did they get there? You know, we have a lot of young listeners, and they're interested in learning about how these thought leaders got to where they are today. So that'll be one part of it. And then the second part, as a reminder, we really do a little more of a deep dive on a particular topic that our guest is interested in. And it's usually a very insightful conversation because the guest has deep insight. And we're really interested to hear more about where they're an expert at and the insight they could provide. Today, I'm really excited to bring Dr. David Vance, a special guest to our podcast. We've had a number of really high-profile guests to date, but today I think David's going to bring a lot of insight about a topic that's near and dear to his heart, and that is around learning measurement, analytics, and reporting. David presently is the executive director for the Center for Talent Reporting, and he's just published and released a brand new book in the market that I've begun reading, and it's called Measurement Demystified. So if you could get your hands on this, you'll really get a jump start on understanding how to learn, how to measure in learning organizations today. So let's get started, and welcome, David.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Glad to be here.
Thank you. The first question I think I like asking is maybe you could tell us about, your youth, where you grew up, your parents, your siblings, and, some of the early education things that you might have done.
Sure. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, not far from the Notre Dame campus. In fact, close enough that on football weekends, we could hear the roar of the crowd. So it was a wonderful place to grow up. My father was a banker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So growing up in the 50s and early 60s, of course, elementary school in those days was in walking distance. So that was nice. And so I just had a very good childhood, really enjoyed it. Always enjoyed school. Parents lived there until they passed away. So they were there the whole time. It was a nice medium-sized city, college, university city. It was a good place to grow up. I was lucky.
Clearly, great place, and of course, I'm a USC football fan, and Notre Dame is famous within itself and in football. So I'm sure you got some really good stories that one day we could tell each other about around a cold drink or something of that nature. But tell me a little more about. Okay, so you grew up and you enjoyed school, and what did you do in terms of going to university? What program did you go in, and were you, particularly interested in one area, or you went into school
Sure.
not certain where you wanted to go? Could you speak to us a little about that?
Yeah, I enjoyed basically all the courses I took through high school. And I guess the ones I liked the most were math and science related. So I wanted to be an astrophysicist
Wow.
is what I thought I would be. Of course, I made that decision even before I took the course in physics. So it was a bit of a blind decision, I suppose. So I went to MIT, and that was a great place. It was in Boston and Cambridge, and it was the early 70s. And the Vietnam War was still going on. I was opposed to that war. So there was just a lot going on there. And MIT was a great school that gave students a lot of latitude. But with all that was going on, I guess I lost interest in the physics and the science side. And instead, I really wanted to better understand how we came to be involved in a war like that. And I wanted to learn more about political science and economics. And fortunately, although it's not well known at the undergraduate level, MIT has great programs in both political science and economics. So I was fortunate that I could pivot and switch into political science. That's what I got my bachelor's degree in, with a minor in economics, along with all the political experience and the anti-war movement that was going on at the time.
Yes.
And then, following along those lines, I decided I wanted to pursue graduate studies in public policy. And I wanted to see what the West Coast was like. So I went off to Berkeley, University of California. And then something completely unexpected happened. I just got tired of school. I got tired of writing papers. I
Yeah.
got tired of studying. And this had never happened to me before. I mean, I loved school. I loved studying. I loved writing papers. I couldn't understand other people said they didn't. And then it happened to me. I guess I just got burned out.
Yes.
So I dropped out of that program and became a motel maintenance man for a while in that area. And then I came back to the Midwest and did maintenance work at a YMCA camp where I had spent a lot of summers growing up. The director of maintenance at the camp was building a house in a bet with a friend down in a small Indiana town. He needed help. So I signed on to help build a house. So I got to learn a lot of carpentry, electricity, plumbing, because we were doing this on the cheap and building this house. And that turned out to be a great experience as well. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to school. This economics thing interested me, so I'll try it again. So I went to Indiana University for a term in their economics program. I didn't like it. It was very mathematical. So
Yeah.
I dropped out of that. At about this time, my father's questioning the ROI of his investment in my college education.
Sure.
So I came back and did some more handyman work. And then for 2 years, I was the director of outdoor education at this YMCA camp where I'd spent so many summers. So something entirely different. And then I met one of the teachers who brought their kids up for outdoor education, and we got married and had to settle down a bit. So we got a more regular job as a consultant in South Bend. But
Yeah.
while I was doing that, then again, I had the urge to get more education and went back, and now I was ready again. So I was eager and ready. I got my MBA, and that was wonderful. And that eventually then led to my wanting to get a PhD in economics. And Notre Dame was right there. That was very convenient. And I got my doctorate in economics from Notre Dame.
Wow. Fantastic. And I'm curious to understand how you got into learning, organizational learning. In a moment, I'm going to ask you more about your career. Maybe that this will be a lead into that. But there's usually something that kind of pops in your mind that I think I would like to get into helping people learn. And often you see practitioners. They were asked to deliver a course in a classroom, right? And they go in and deliver a half-day course, and they loved how it went and their control of everything. And you know what? I'm going to become a trainer or something of that nature. So I'm curious your thoughts around how you might have been nudged in that direction.
I took a completely different path, and it had never crossed my mind any time in my schooling or career earlier that I might end up in corporate learning. So with that PhD in economics, I came to Caterpillar as an economist, and then I worked my way up to chief economist and head of the business intelligence group. And I did that for 5 or 6 years. And then one day, my vice president comes to me and says, Dave, go see the head of HR. Okay, fine. Go see him. And he says, you probably didn't know this, but we spent the last 6 months investigating the concept of a corporate university. And we have decided to proceed. And we are going to establish Caterpillar University. Why don't you run that for us? And I said, what is a corporate university? And they said, here, we've had 9 people spending these last 6 months studying this. Here's what we want to do. So it was a Friday afternoon. Take a look at it over the weekend and give us your answer on Monday. Oh, wow. Talk about something out of the blue, completely unexpected. Now I said, I don't know anything about corporate learning. And they said, you'll be fine. So, okay. So I thought about it over the weekend. So what was I to do? I could stay in economics where I wasn't always right. I mean, as economists, you make a lot of forecasts that don't turn out.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
okay. But at least I knew it. And I could resolve disputes among my direct reports about what the forecast would be. So I could stay in an area I was comfortable in, although not perfect. Or I could move to a brand new area where I knew nothing. And everyone working for me would know that I knew nothing. about it. And that's kind of an uncomfortable position to be in.
Yes.
So it's a risk, but I like risk, and uncertainty doesn't bother me. And I was ready for a new challenge. So I took it, and I'm so glad I did because it introduced me to a whole brand new field. So unlike most people, as you just discussed, who maybe had a chance to teach a course and got the bug that way, I had none of that. In fact, I had complained openly about training at Caterpillar, calling various courses a waste of time. I didn't understand the 40-hour a year requirement didn't make any sense to me. Maybe that's part of why they picked me, because I was outspoken and they were saying, okay, Dave, let's see what you do.
Yes.
You don't like how some of that's being run. Let's see what you do with it. But it turned out to be a great experience, just a
Yeah.
wonderful experience. And that's why when I retired from Caterpillar, I wanted to stay in the learning field.
Understood. And how long were you at Caterpillar, David?
20 years.
Wow, that's a good piece of your career. And so you jumped in to create Caterpillar, Cat U, I think you called it. And what was that like? What was some of your challenges going in, not being a learning practitioner by trade, let's call it that, and then taking over and trying to build a brand new university that wasn't there, but conceptually it was there from
Right.
people who did, let's call it a needs assessment. And there you were. So tell us some of the things that jump out in your mind.
Well, the first thing I had to do was start learning about corporate learning, right? So obviously, I asked people for books and they told me what I should read. I joined ATD. I started going to conferences. All these things were incredibly helpful because I was starting from scratch. But I also had a mentor. So there was a person who had been on that team who recommended the Cat U. And he was very much a learning expert. And he was from Singapore, as it turned out. But he stayed on in Illinois, which is where Cat was headquartered, and was on my team. So I learned from him. I was asking him questions all the time. We traveled the world together, visiting various sites where we would have Cat U locations, meeting people in the business units all over the world. So we spent a lot of time together, and slowly I began to learn about corporate learning and how you might do it strategically. What I did bring with me, though, was this sense of business. So I've always thought since I started Cat U that what we really need in our field is to blend a sense of business with learning. And that ideally, leaders in our field would have both. They'd have some business backgrounds, they have a sense for business, but they'd also be experts in learning. And I think it's the combination there that's so important. So I didn't have the learning background, so I needed to reach out to someone who did have it
Yes.
and partner up with them. And I hired, for my direct reports, I hired some people from learning and I hired others. Like my dean for engineering is an engineer. My dean for marketing came from marketing. They didn't come from learning because they needed to have instant credibility with their colleagues in their areas of discipline.
Yes.
But obviously we had to have some people who knew about learning. So we had a blended approach, which had challenges, but I think it worked.
Very interesting. So you got the Cat U rocket off the ground. Here you are taking off, and you got the right people in place, which is always critical to get a good program working well, functioning well, and communicating with the organization as a whole, and this whole notion around a culture of learning. Um, do one or two big challenges jump out at you, David, that occurred during your building of this Cat U over that period of time that really, perhaps made you pivot in a new direction of the way you did things there, or it was a tremendous learning moment? Any thoughts around that?
Not so much in terms of events that caused, I mean, we were going through a recession, but just as soon as we launched Cat U, the recession of 2001 began. So we were always challenged by resources, but that's a
Yes.
challenge a lot of people face. What comes to mind, though, in answering your question more, is the resistance I faced from a lot of people in the learning organization about the way I wanted to manage. So I remember walking into the wing where the predecessor organization was and someone coming up to me, and after offering me suggestions on what books I might want to read, pulling me aside and telling me that I had to understand now that I was in HR, because learning was part of HR, and that HR is not run with any business discipline. We don't set specific measurable goals. We don't hold people accountable. And that was probably my greatest single challenge, especially in the early years, was overcoming this resistance to having SMART goals and to being accountable to deliver them. And then when we began to set up the colleges and began to make our plans to support the sales goal, the quality goal, the manufacturing goals, I pushed my deans to set again specific measurable goals. But that was tough because they would look to me for advice. They'd say, Dave, you brought me in. I don't know anything about corporate learning. Can you give me advice on what a reasonable goal would be? Well, actually, I couldn't.
Yeah.
So we were all learning together. So our challenge was to create a safe working environment, especially that first year, where we would push ourselves to run it like a business and to have SMART goals, but recognizing that we really didn't have enough background to even know what we were doing. We just did the best we could, and we learned together in that first year in a safe environment. No one's performance review would be affected by how close you came to achieving your plan. Now, second year, we began playing for keeps, but everyone began to get comfortable with it. And by year 3, there was no problem. Everyone was used to this concept of running learning like a business, and we were off to better things.
And I know your passion today is in learning measurement and analytics. And I know when you were there at CATU, you began implementing different types of measures. So I've heard you mention, impacting the business and that sort of thing. What were some of the initial tasks that you did to begin actually measuring some of the progress, and how's this program working? Is CATU any good? Are we spending our
Right.
money there? What were some of the initial steps you took?
Yeah, so I came up to speed real quickly on measurement because I like numbers and measures, so that was easy enough for me to do. But I think what made the difference is we started up front, not at the end with measuring, but up front. So we put a business plan together in year 1 for CATU, and we would do that every year. And in that business plan, we would start by aligning our learning to the goals of the CEO. So I had a conversation with our CEO about 5 months before the next fiscal year began to get a heads up on what the goals and goal owners were going to be. And then we go talk to the goal owners. And then we orchestrated a process to coordinate with the 28 business units to find out what their issues and concerns were. We brought all that together. So top down, plus across the board with the 28 business units, we pulled all this information together, kind of a macro needs analysis. And then along with that, in identifying where we would spend our time, what our programs would be, we also put our specific measurable targets in the business plan. We expect to be able to help to increase sales by 2%. We're going to help reduce injuries by 5%. One after another. Here's what we think we can accomplish. And here's what it's going to take to accomplish that. So the template was set for measuring throughout the year and at the end of the project or the end of the year. So what we did in measurement in the end was just following up on what we had told people we would do originally. And so we designed our reports throughout the year to give us continuous updates every month. Are we on plan? Are we going to make plan by the end of the year? And if not, then what do we need to do right now to try to get back on plan? So we tried to run learning just like our colleagues were running sales, running manufacturing, running any other department. And that influenced our measurement strategy. So we had to have the measures in order to run CATU like a business.
Yeah, interesting. And how did your leadership respond with that? Because that was new to organizations from a learning organization perspective.
Oh, they loved it. I mean, if you're talking about the leaders like the CEO, CFO above me, they loved it. Very shortly after we started CATU, we had a change in CEO, and he happened to have been an economist. So we got along really well. We were always on the same page. But the CFO loved it as well, and the other senior leaders. We had a corporate board of governors with a lot of these senior leaders on it, and we met every quarter. So I always had great support from the CEO, and the leaders loved this approach. So they really liked that we were putting out specific measurable goals, that we ran it with the same discipline other departments run it, that we presented all the data to them every quarter in the Board of Governors meeting, that we had a written business plan. And, they gave us input into this to begin with and then followed along. In fact, when I left, the last meeting I had with our CFO said, Dave, we've been working together for these past 5 or 6 years. You've given me the business plan to look at every year. I just have one thing to say to you. I think you've been too conservative. I think CAT-U has produced greater results and had greater impact than you're showing in your measures. I could accept that. That was wonderful to hear, that he thought we were being conservative.
Wow.
And that we actually had more impact than we were talking about.
Wow.
So I think the approach works. I think senior leaders love it. Research by the Phillips shows that CEOs want to hear about impact, want to hear about ROI. And so that's what we did.
That was amazing to hear that, and particularly getting an early start. So maybe we could slowly transition here, David, to after you left Caterpillar, and you started working in and pulling people together for your Center for Talent Reporting. And I think there's a interesting piece that I would like to explore deeper is around the area. You pulled a number of very good thought leaders together to work towards having a framework for measurement and that sort of stuff. And I'm not going to speak about that myself, but what drove you to think and bring a group of people together? Was it difficult getting this initial group together? Speak to me a little about that. That'd be great.
I really got to give credit to Kent Barnett, who many people might know as the founder of Knowledge Advisors and the Metrics That Matter product that a lot of us use for measurement. We did at Caterpillar. So I'd known Kent ever since he started Metrics That Matter in about 2001, same time CAT-U started. He's actually the one, along with Tamara Uckelis, who was at Qualcomm at the time, who had the idea over cocktails at one of the CLO symposiums that it might be time to make another run at trying to bring standards, best practices, classifications to L&D. So they were thinking that accounting has a framework. Accounting has a system of classifications. They have 4 types of measures: income, revenue, expenses, assets, and liabilities. They have 3 standard statements to put them in. Why doesn't learning have something like that? A little brief effort had been tried in the 80s. It never gained traction. So they thought it was time to make another run at this. And Kent, who is one of the connector type peoples, he knew a lot of the CLOs, the other leaders. And so he's the one that pulled the group together. So he gets the credit for really the idea and the inspiration to give this a go. And he and Tamar pulled the group together. Then they got me involved. And so I became, to begin with, like the lead researcher and researched what was out there in the literature, what others were doing. And then with input from the group, we came up with our recommended approach. And that's what became the Talent Development Reporting Principles. They came out first for learning in 2011, and then in 2012 for all areas of HR.
You just came out with a new book, and I'm working my way through it. Tell our audience a little bit about the book and its focus and what you're hoping to get out of it by really doing a huge effort pulling that large book together.
Sure. Our goal was really to address the need that we have found in our field to make it easier for people to do measurement and reporting. It's like everybody knows they should do it, and they say they want to do more of it. But when we work with people, we find a lot of people say, I really don't know where to start. And there are so many measures, I don't know which ones to use. And we call them by different names and we define them differently. And that's all very confusing. And although we have the Kirkpatrick Phillips framework for program evaluation, which we certainly incorporated, that doesn't cover all the measures or all the reasons to measure or all the uses for measures. So what we lack that other professions have is this broad conceptual framework that encompasses everything having to do with measurement and reporting. So we hope that if we put this together, and that's what we really tried to do initially with talent development reporting principles, and then over the last 10 years, as we got feedback from people, as we did workshops, we wrote white papers, people said, well, you left this part out, or you didn't give me enough help here. So we incorporated all that we'd learned. So really the book is a culmination of all we've learned over the last 10 years, built off that initial foundation. And our hope is this is the first book anyone in the future will read who's interested in measurement and reporting. And with this foundation, then you're set to better appreciate works by Kirkpatrick, by Phillips, by John Maddox, by all the others in our field who have made great contributions as well, because we're going to cover all the measures, all the reasons to measure, and this area of reporting for which there was no book. No one has written before a book or any guidance on reporting. So even once people came up with their measures, the question was, well, what do I do with them? And we've got people generating scorecards and dashboards and adding visual elements, but to what end and for what purpose? And is that the appropriate medium to report the results out to the users? So we wanted to answer all those questions and pull together in one book what everyone would need to get started, but also make it a performance support tool for the experienced professionals, because we define 120 measures. We define the different types of reports. We tell you how to create the plan numbers, how to use the year-to-date results, how to make a forecast. All that's in there as well for the experienced professional.
Some of our fellow colleagues in the learning business are hesitant to dip their toes in the water to get started. This is a common statement made, which you know very well about, David. How do you answer that to a person who's got your book, read, there's interest, but going like, well, how do I get started? How do I collect this information? Where do I go? You know, how do you nudge someone along like that?
So we urge people to start small, start with what they already have. Don't make it complicated. It doesn't need to be. So start small and grow the effort. And you'll be amazed in 3 or 4 years where you are compared to where you started. But the important thing is to get started. So our single piece of advice is just do it. Stop talking about it, stop thinking about it, and just do it. Now, by that, we would suggest, to be a little more specific and helpful, one of the types of reports is a program report. And a program report is where you pull together the program or programs that are going to help you achieve a corporate goal, like increasing sales or reducing injuries or improving employee engagement. So you want to pull together the program or the programs that do that and capture their key measures and other key indicators. So we'd say start with one of them. Now in CAT-U, we review 10 of these every month, but start with one. And start with a goal owner who you already have good relations with. We call them friendlies. Don't start with one of your enemies or hard to work with people. You all know what they are. But there's certainly someone that appreciates you already. You work well with them and their team. Start with them and their goal. And we give you enough direction in the book to have the upfront discussions with those stakeholders, what you should talk about, how you can agree on measures of success, what kinds of measures you should include. And if you don't have all that we recommend, that's okay. Start with what you do have. And you know what? Everyone has level 1 participant reaction. Everyone has data on tests where they're appropriate. We begin to drop off on level 3 application, level 4 impact. But you know what? With SurveyMonkey these days, it's easy to get application data and easy to get impact data. Yeah. In the old days, you might have had to hire a consultant or something, but not anymore. And we tell you how to ask the question, how to word it. So give it a try is what we would say to someone. Start with one program, set yourself up for success. And hopefully that works well, and then you can replicate it. So that's on the program side. On helping your CLO with kind of the measures that they want to see, just start by asking your CLO what measures are important to her for the coming year. What are the handful of measures where you want to drive some improvement? Not in one program, because you're addressing that with the program report, but across everything you do. Do you want to try to improve level 1 overall across all your programs? Do you want to try to increase the reach, the percent of employees we touch? Do you want to reduce the cycle time it takes us to turn out programs? And usually CLOs have a couple things in mind they want to work on for the coming year. So again, don't make it 20 or 30, 2, 3, 4. What are the few things that you'd really like to move the needle on? You really want to make progress. Let's focus first on those measures.
Got
So
it.
we put those in an operations report. So start simple with a few measures, start with one program report, start with a simple operations report, grow from there.
Wonderful. And would you have any recommendations for early adopters here? It's not really early adoption, but those who want to get in to it and learn more, where could they go to learn more about how to do this? And maybe you could speak to us a little about
Well,
that.
we've written the book, of course, to hopefully answer that. But
Yes.
if people read the book and that isn't enough, then we also do 2 and 3 day virtual workshops now. We speak at conferences. So there are a lot of others. We have an annual conference of our own each year. It was virtual this last year in October. And there are a lot of others in the field also doing webinars all the time on some of these measurement topics. Certainly the ROI Institute with Jack and Patty Phillips and the Kirkpatricks are both running a lot of virtual events. And I would encourage people to take advantage of those as well. So selfishly, I would say take a look at our book first to give you a foundation. But then for more information, if you really want to learn how to do the Kirkpatrick approach for results or the Phillips approach to get to level 4 impact and ROI, then you really need to attend their workshops and go to their webinars. And they're both set up to help you do that. I would encourage you to do that. So we have so many great professionals in our field, and they have so many ways that they can reach out to you. Avail yourselves of that. And even in the virtual world, you can do it. So they're all running virtual workshops. So sign up for them and become an expert in the ROI or Kirkpatrick approach. Market share is pretty evenly split between those two approaches. So about half the people like the Kirkpatrick approach, half the people like the Phillips approach. So whichever one appeals to you, go learn more about it.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you for that. As we near the end of this podcast, do you have any advice to people who are just in the beginnings of working within a learning department in an organization? How might they follow a similar career path like yours? And just, a couple of high level points, David, that you would say, here's what I think someone should do. Like,
Right.
I'll just say one to help lead you here a little bit. Like, I really believe that if you want to grow, is try to get an internal mentor, a coach, to kind of help you along as you move through and up the ladder in within the learning group, and how to acquire information. Your
Yeah,
thought.
I think having a mentor is a great idea, just learning more in general. So take advantage of the learning opportunities that hopefully your organization gives you. So read books, attend webinars, go to conferences, go to workshops to get deeper knowledge. Definitely do all that. But beyond that, from my own career in looking back, what helped me? How was I able to rise at the time, not in learning, but through economics, for instance? Well, I worked hard and I tried to learn as much and improve myself as I could in economics. But beyond that, in any organization, people come and people go, and there's always opportunities for rearranging responsibilities. Look for opportunities to volunteer to take on more. When an economist would leave or be switched, their responsibilities would be up for grabs, basically. And I would put my hand up. I'll do that one. And sometimes that even added, I didn't take anything off my plate, but I added that to my plate. It would show leaders that I was eager to do more, but it also allowed me to learn about another area. In economics, we divided the world. So I had Latin America and Canada. Then the US became open. I said, I'll take that too, because I want to learn more about that. I want that visibility. So look for opportunities to raise your hand to the extent your work-life balance permits it. Look for opportunities, because when I became a department head, that's how it's one of the factors I'm looking at to judge up and coming people. Who's raising their hand? Who's not only working hard and being very productive, but who's raising their hand, maybe for challenge assignments, maybe outside their area of comfort? I'm going to be impressed by that, especially if they do well. So
Mhm.
you've got to look for the opportunities. Don't wait for someone to come to you. You volunteer. You seek out that opportunity. Be proactive. All someone do is say no, but they'll still think better of you for volunteering and asking. So seek it out. Take a risk. Now, I took a big risk when I switched from economics to learning.
Sure.
So don't be afraid to take a risk. Don't be afraid to get outside your comfort zone. You don't know what you're going to find. I thought I had the perfect job in economics, and I think I would have been happy to end my career as an economist. But it turns out I found more satisfaction in the corporate learning field, and I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't taken a chance. So take risks, take a chance
I love it.
on something new.
Yeah, I love it. That's great advice for people who are younger and getting started in our business. So let me turn the tide on that one with one final question here for you today, David. Is what's the future looking like for you? You know, had a great career and doing amazing things in the world of measurement and analytics reporting. What's the future looking like for you at this point? Are you willing to share any thoughts or?
Well, sure. But what I've learned is not to be too presumptuous about what your future is going to hold, because things come along.
Yes,
And if you're willing to try different things and take chances, you never know where you're going to end up.
yes.
So right now, I plan to continue for a while longer doing what I'm currently doing because I really enjoy it. And this is just what I wanted to do at this stage in life. So
Mm,
I am doing just what I wanted to be doing. Giving back to the profession is what I wanted to do because the profession's been so good to me. So I am very happy to have this opportunity to give back, to try to advance the profession. We are extending our work now beyond just learning to human capital reporting in general. So some exciting things have been happening lately with the SEC mandating human capital disclosure. So we're actually pivoting a little bit and we'll give more focus to human capital reporting across all areas of HR, which is
mhm,
going to be a growing area for the next couple of years.
mhm.
I also teach, so I teach at three universities and their graduate programs, and I really enjoy that. So I'll keep doing that. And maybe I'll retire doing these things we've just talked about.
Yeah.
Or who knows, maybe something else will come along. I'm not ready yet to just start playing golf or cards 5 days a week. So I like being engaged. So I'll keep doing this until something else comes along.
Fantastic. And I wish you the very best with that. You know, personally speaking, I'm most thankful to you and the work you and others have supported you with. It's a tremendous contribution to learning. And I think it's something that will continue to grow as we become better at understanding what needs to be done and how to collect information, how to effectively report out into it. And technology is changing to be able to collect more data and things of that sort. So I thank you for that, David. And this brings us to the end of our podcast today. Thank you very much, Dr. David Vance. And I'd like to thank Jordak Consultants for sponsoring this podcast. And please join in for our next one next month. That will be coming along shortly. Everyone be safe out there and stay well. Thank you very much.